Hello and welcome to Comedy in a Nutshell, the podcast in which I ask, inquire, examine, query, entreat, exhort, beseech, request, interrogate, implore, investigate, and question what comedy means to the people who create and perform it, and they in turn will reply, respond, retort, rejoin, riposte, and occasionally answer. I'm the comedy nerd who's seen more than 1,700 different comedians perform live comedy, and you can find out more about my journey in comedy fandom on my website, thecomedynerd.com. Please also take a moment to like, subscribe, rate, review, and share the podcast. Thank you. My guest this episode is a Denmark-based comedian whose first solo hour was performed at the 2024 Edinburgh Fringe to critical acclaim, receiving award nominations from the Edinburgh Comedy Awards, the Comedian's Choice Award, and the Next Up Biggest Award in Comedy, and winning Best Newcomer at the Jones Bootmakers-ish Edinburgh Comedy Awards. It's comedian Abby Wambaugh. How early on do you think that comedy was an influence on you?
I think it's always been really important part of like the way that I think about myself that I'm funny. When I was 12, I have a 12-year-old daughter right now, so I'm thinking a lot about this age at the moment. But I remember being 12 and deciding to be funny. I was funny at home. My dad's funny. My family is funny. Like we laughed. We like made a lot of jokes. We stayed up and watched The Late Show, like it was a part of our lives. But I was like a really serious kid in school, and I was I was just protesting everything all the time. I would read, you weren't allowed to read the Bible. You weren't allowed to read religious texts in my school. And so I would like bring a Bible and like whatever religious text I could find, and I would like read like comic books inside of it, but just like to object to the fact that you weren't allowed. And I would like stick up for people. I just was inserting myself in ways that were actually like good, like the good-hearted, good things. But I just didn't know how to do that in a way that like meant I could also have friends. And then I did a presentation when I was 12 years old. It was about geometry. Of course. And you were, and you were like supposed to pick a shape and present to the class as the shape. And I built a cube out of paper. And then my friend helped me. He played Hugh Downs and I played Barbara Walters, the American interviewer. And I did a Barbara Walters impression, and my friend sat next to me and just shuffled papers. And if he ever spoke, I like told him to shut up. And I just like talked in a like rude Barbara Walters accent as a person interviewing a cube. And the class like died laughing. And for the rest of the day, everyone like forgave me for all of the annoying things that I did and said, and were like interested in them in a new way. And I was like, I literally remember thinking like, is that all it takes? Like, is it just that you can say whatever you want and you can tell people what you think? You just have to be funny. Yeah. And I just was like, decided to try it. And it is all you need to do is the truth.
Yeah. I can't remember where the quote is from, sadly. I never can. So I apologize to everyone I've miscredited for these things. But one of the famous quotes is, it's not people saying funny things, it's funny people saying things.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, I think there is like, whenever this conversation happens, like you're not allowed to say anything anymore. I'm like, you're literally allowed to say everything. Like you're allowed to say anything. And you just have to like, say it right.
Yeah.
And it's really like buoyed me my whole life. I didn't like stand up until I started doing it, which 4 years ago. I never liked watching it. And I think that's because I was like jealous. Like I was just like, I don't want to sit here and watch someone else be funny. I don't want to just like sit here and take it. And I just felt like, so I was never like really, I wasn't going after watching stand-up. I didn't have like a favorite stand-up comedian until I started doing it. And now I like can't see enough. Like I want to see it all. And I'm really interested in what people are doing. But I think you kind of got to be part of it for some people to be able to stand it.
not being particularly interested in stand-up per se, did you have people who influenced you, either people to look up to inspire, or to encourage people in your own life who pointed you in that direction?
Oh yeah. Well, I did improv in high school
Yeah.
and I really, really got into it. And I had just this drama teacher in high school who, like, my life wasn't at risk, but I could say he saved it anyway. Like, he was just one of these like guys who, like, if you were looking for that in high school, like, you found him, and he just like opened this like room up to you, and you were allowed to hang out in there with your friends all the time, and he gave you like light and mildly concerned supervision, and he was funny, and he introduced us to different ways of being funny that, like, I didn't know about improv until him and his wife, actually, who's a junior high teacher and taught drama there, like, opened this whole thing up to me. And then me and my friends just got this like chance to be funny with each other in a new way, and it was so fun and special. And I thought, and so improv was like kind of the first comedy that was actually comedy that hooked me. And that was because you got to do it right then. You didn't have to. Also, I thought it was so embarrassing stand up, because it's like, you're in stand up, you're admitting that you thought about it earlier and that you think it's funny. And in improv, you just show up and you're like, well, whatever happens, like, maybe it'll be like, oh, is that funny? I don't know. Oh, is it funny? And how nice, how less embarrassing if it doesn't work. Yeah, so definitely him and other. I had some really great teachers who saw that because I didn't do my homework, I came late to school, I skipped school. I like shouldn't have passed high school, really, and somehow I did, because I had this like group of teachers, and I saw around me at the time, like, not everyone was getting this experience. Like, other kids that were doing the same stuff as me were not passing. Like, it was. And in that way, when I became a teacher, I thought a lot about that. Like, I got given the gift of exception over and over and over again. And I'm so grateful. Like, that was good for me. I just like always think about that for other young people, like that not everybody is given that gift. And I'm so grateful to have gotten it, and also to have gotten to literally witness not everyone getting it too. But I had these teachers who just saw that, like, I was allowed to make things beside the project they were doing. And if I didn't hand in my essay, like, I could direct a play. Like, it was like, people really made things work for me. And I think that's like a huge part of the way I think about my whole life, is because I was allowed to do things like that. I do come at things from a different angle. Like, I do like think like, how can I do that in a way that feels like it'll work for me? And I think that's hugely because I had adults in my life who were willing to accept something different from me.
Yeah. It's interesting because I mean, my next question is, why did you want to become a comedian? But moreover, why are so many people who are clearly exceptional and who think differently and who have such potential inside them want to become a clown? It's not highly paid. It's not, in some circumstances, even highly regarded. But so many people who are very educated and very erudite and sophisticated decide, yeah, I'm going to pretend to be a vacuum cleaner for 5 minutes. What's
Oh, you've seen my show.
Oh, yes. What a surprise. But, it's why, where does this come from? What is this phenomenon, if you like?
I think, I think this is such a good question. I think about it in my own life too. It feels like being a clown is the easiest and most accessible entry point into being a thought leader. I was like, otherwise what? I'm going to be a politician? I'm going to convince people to vote for me? I'm going to have to craft a message? No, if I am going to be a clown or a stand-up, I can decide every day what I think and then tell people on a stage and change it every time. Like, I get to really say what I think because it's only for one room of people at a time. I think that, like, for me anyway, and I know that's not how everybody feels. Not everybody does want to be saying something more than just making people laugh, but I do. And I think that like being funny is a gift that I have. It's like it's a thing that I can do, that I like to do, that feels easy for me. It feels like the path of least resistance for communicating whatever I want to communicate. And that isn't always a funny thing. My show is about miscarriage and starting things and things without an end. And but it's funny because that is also the only way I could make something and it be like actually related to me. If I wrote something and it really, and I have written things like poems and, essays and things that aren't funny, but there's always something. If it feels like me, there's got to be something funny. Like that is just like, it's the tool I know how to use, and it's the one I want to pick up. And it's like, I don't know. It's like, who's the one that cuts out paper? It's like, oh, you see the cutout paper thing. You're like, oh, that's a Picasso. We don't like him right now. I don't know. Anyway. Yeah, but I think like there was a time when I taught at a school that was like, it was a play-based school, and it was like the only required stuff was education for social justice. And I got so much out of that work. Like I really did. And it was fun and it was interesting and it was really challenging. And I was exhausted constantly from the like level of emotional work and support I was giving other people. And when I was doing that, teaching young people and being a parent, I was just empty. Like I didn't have anything left over to make anything with or anything else. And I got a lot out of that. But now that it was too hard for me. And it wasn't using the things I can do all the time. In some parts it was. Like when I could be in a room playing with kids, and sometimes like talking to parents about their kids, like I really liked it and I could feel my skills like being used. And I like people. That's like a real skill I have that not everyone has. So that's good to have around young people. I really like kids and I like teenagers. But I can feel now that that it's okay and good actually, and good for the people around you, for you to follow what comes easy to you. And being in front of people and being funny does come pretty easy to me. And it feels good to be still doing things I believe in, but like using skills that don't feel like I'm kind of operating with like my arms tied behind my back.
Was there a specific moment? Was there an incident or an influence or a time in your life where you said, I'm going to be a comedian now. This is what I am. This is what I want to do. Yeah.
Well, in my show, I talk about this, but really, truly, when I woke up in the hospital after I had a late miscarriage and I was high on drugs, and I had been doing musical improv just in my neighborhood at that point. And people started telling me I should try stand up. And I kept saying to them, like, I don't like stand up. I'm also pregnant. I know what I'm going to try for the next 3 years. And it's like breastfeeding again. Like I'm not looking for another hobby right now or a creative outlet. I'm going to I know this. And then I had a miscarriage at 17 weeks, and I had a procedure, in the hospital. And when I woke up, I was like still on drugs, and I was like, I'm going to be a stand-up comedian. So yeah, that was when, and I when I sobered up, I could see where that came from. Yeah. And I also could see that like, it wasn't a normal way to grieve, but it stuck. Like, I was like, I don't know. I felt, clear on that's what I was going to do next. And I signed up for my first gig while I was still really recovering physically. Yeah. And I was really sad. Like, I just want to be clear, I think, about that like, I was really sad. And I was like sitting, while my kids were at school, I was like sitting and like looking. I just remember looking at the glass in the windows, like not out the window, but like at the window. And then I would have like a mild burst of energy and I would like go to the bathroom and like refill my water and come back down. And like every one or two, like every once in a while in one of those, I'd be like, Google, how do you do a stand-up gig in Denmark? Like, or like comedy open mics. Like I didn't even know the words to Google. I was like, how do you find this out? And then I don't know, but while I was still really like convalescing, I signed up for one and I did one, like a month after my miscarriage, I did my first, one.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, there was only one joke that was really about, that time in my life. Like I didn't do any miscarriage jokes, although now I've done a whole show about it. But, it was, we've all been sad. We've all eaten pizza in the shower. Was the only thing I said about that time in my life during that set. But yeah.
Yeah. How was that? I mean, where, first of all, was that gig and how was it? How did it go? How did it feel?
It was at Lugden Station, which is like this, it's an old train station in Copenhagen. It's beautiful. Mm-hmm. It's about it's like a 10-minute walk away from my house, which is so funny. And it's it's like a publicly run like Copenhagen arts venue. And, it's a beautiful building. It was really great. And okay, so Denmark is like a small comedy scene. It was also a Danish open mic, which usually now I don't really do Danish open mics unless I'm getting ready for like a gig that I know is going to be in front of an audience that's going to have to switch languages. And like in general, there are also open mics in English here and like performances in English in Copenhagen. Yeah. But this was my first one. It was a Danish open mic. I didn't know that there was a difference. And I was like on the same bill because Denmark's so small, the comedy scene's little. I didn't know, but this just like, I went home afterwards and I was like telling my partner like that these guys were really nice to me. Of course, all guys. And he's like, who were they? And I was like, oh, this guy named Geo or something. And he's like, what? It was like the like Danish Pauly Shore. Like he was like a huge like 90s, early 2000s comedian, like still a big comedian, but like the kind of guy that my partner would like quote to his friends. Like it was just, that's the size of the scene here is like, you can't really be backstage at one of these gigs without like one of the biggest comedians in the country being there. And it was good. It was good. They said it was good. The guys backstage like really were encouraging. That was kind of the best part is like 2 or 3 of these comedians were really like, afterwards, I didn't tell anybody it was my first time. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards they were like, wow, that was good. How come I haven't seen you around? And I was like, because that was the first time I ever did it. Oh! And they were like, of course I overran. I got a 5-minute spot. I like did like 8 minutes. That's bad. That's not allowed. So the host was a little chilly to me, but I didn't really know I didn't know anything. So I didn't know that was bad or anything. And then I emailed him later and I was like, I found out that's bad. And I looked at the time on my tape. My friends, I had 2 friends come and I didn't want them to. I kept saying like, don't come, please don't come, please don't come. I don't want anybody to see this. I don't want to know anybody. And then they taped it. And so I have a tape of it actually. And I'm so glad they came also because that was the biggest thing for me to get over was I found it so embarrassing to perform in front of people I know. I still really feel aware of it, actually, if I know that like somebody's going to be in the audience that I am close to or I'm not close to, but I haven't seen for a while, like whatever. And so to have 2 of my friends there the first time kind of like opened the door to that as a possibility. I feel like I would be performing in a mask now if they hadn't come.
So having then spent some time from that first gig performing, is comedy shaping out to be everything that you anticipated? Have you had any surprises?
Oh, it's much better than I anticipated, I think. I think because I started during COVID. Yeah. That first set was in November 2020. So it was right after Biden got elected. It was like right at the end of Trump's first term. And so this year, in November, I felt like it was like 4 years since I started, and I felt that very acutely because of the sort of the cycle that is 4 years in American culture that we are really getting a chance to see now. So, so when I started, I really thought it was like also, it was COVID, my kids were home, when I felt like I needed to find like a creative outlet, and that was one that was like manageable. The same way I said, like, it's a thing where you can decide what you think every night and then say it.
Yeah.
I was like, I always thought I would write a book. I am now. I think I'm really going to finish one this time. But I didn't have the time to like create anything beyond like 5 or 10 minutes of material that I could like complete on stage and then decide whether to continue with. Right. So when I started, it really was kind of like a stopgap creative like measure. It was like, this is a creative act I can complete. And I was like, it will help me get back into the things I want to do. It's like, I think it'll help my writing get like tighter. And I knew that I thought I could do it. I've always been good at being in front of people. I've performed. Like, I was like, I could do this. So, I didn't expect anything from it. I certainly didn't expect to feel how I feel about it now, which is like in love. Like, I'm in love with comedy now. I've fallen deeply in love making my show. And that's really when that happened for me, is when from a year ago, I was working on my first work in progress for that show. And starting to put that together was when I was first like, wait a second, it can be anything. Like, comedy is like a promise about where you're going to land. And the whole time you're up in the air, you can do whatever you want. It was in the Pleasance Comedy Reserve last year.
Yeah.
And I just got to watch everything that Pleasance put up for free. So I really tried to. And I saw a bunch of shows. And every time I went to one, I was like, oh, it could be like that. And I just was like writing down a new idea for a show, like every time I went to a show. People thought I was a reviewer. I know that people did because because I was always like, I got my notebook out in the middle of the show, and I could feel like, well, I think one time I really could feel, I think it was Alistair Beckett King, like shift toward me when my notebook came out, and I just like put it back on my lap, like, oops. Like, nobody wants to see a notebook out during your show. But I just kept being so inspired, and that really like kind of sparked it. And then I had this idea for the first 3 minutes of 17 shows so that I could have my cake and eat it too, basically. And and now I'm just like, oh my God, like the possibilities are endless. I just
Well, let's talk about your show then. So this is your debut hour at Edinburgh this year. As you say, first 3 minutes of 17 shows. You've mentioned briefly that it was based on miscarriage, but what is the story? What is... Actually, I don't want to ask. Where do you get your crazy ideas from? That's so stupid. What I'm alluding to here is it's a very novel and very original format. It was a very exciting show. It's been very well received by critics and your peers alike. So tell us about the show.
Yeah, well, that's really how it started, was that I just kept having ideas for shows from watching other people's incredible shows. And I felt really inspired by them. And I just kept thinking like, oh, like my first show. And I kind of knew that I would probably do my first show next year, like maybe. And when I was in the Comedy Reserve in 2023. And I was like, it could be like this. It could be like, what if I did? And really I made this like ongoing joke with two of my friends, Diedrich Zermund and Dan Jones. I was hanging out a lot at that Fringe with them. And I kept saying like, I got a new idea for our show. Like, what if? Okay. And they were so like, these boys are sweet boys and they're very funny and they're just like the best to talk to about ideas. I was like, okay, well, there's this. Okay. So there's me and another person on the stage. And there's no ball and there's no bat. It just kept every time tricking these nice guys into listening to me describe a mime basketball show. And I just like would go on and on and on and on. And then every time I would tell them it was about a different thing, and they would just like, and I just wouldn't stop. Like, I just thought this was the funniest bit, that I was going to explain this mime basketball show to them 800 times. And then I just like I did it a little bit, like I tried to do it on stage at some point, like explain this mime basketball show. And then I was like, what if I really did that for an hour? Like, how could I do? And then I just like kept thinking of like other ideas for a show. I wanted to do a church service show, which I think now I know has been done, but like I wanted to like frame it around like the things that happen in church, and not to like make fun of church, but just like what a great, like they really got a handle on ceremony there. And I wanted to do like, I just had this long list of things I thought would be so exciting, formats to try or like ways to be. And I saw some clown stuff that I didn't know that I loved clown. I didn't know what clown was. And every time I would come out of a show and be like, what was that though? It would be clown. I'd be like, that's like stand up, but it's better and more interesting and more responsive. And they'd be like, yeah, it's clown. So I did then take some clown workshops. And I just felt like the idea for the first 3 minutes of 17 shows literally came when I was talking to Diedrich and Dan another time. And I was just like, what if I did all of them? Like, what if I did all of the ideas for a show? Definitely the basketball one will be in there. And I knew right away I would want to tell the story of how I started comedy after a miscarriage. But I didn't put together that, of course, that's kind of the theme of the whole show then, is starting things that don't end, until pretty damn far into the process, to be honest. Like, kind of like... And then a series of things kept occurring that made it more like I had this number 9 bit in there where I do an impression of a number 9 for so long. I didn't know why it fit in there. I was putting a pillow inside of my shirt so that they were like big boobs that made me the number 9. And I was like, I thought this number 9 bit was so funny when I first wrote it. And I just wrote it like all in one go. Every number pun just like flowed out of me. And then some audiences liked it. Some audiences were like, what the hell are you doing here? Get out of my house. And I was just like, this is going in the show. This is one of the shows. This is one of the shows. And I literally had no idea why until I went to the basement with my partner. We have like a basement storage room. And I went to the basement to find something to wear for the number 9. And this was like the number, like it was like on my to-do list this whole time, like figure out why the number 9 is there, like figure out why it's in the show. Like, why is it in the show? I guess like 9 months, like somebody pointed that out to me and I was like, yeah, maybe, but like, no, like I just kind of thought if I were looking at it like an editor, I would get rid of it. But I felt like I couldn't, like I felt like it was supposed to be there. And then we went in the basement to find something for me to use as the number 9, like pillow to put in me. Cause I was like, it has to be really clear that I'm the number 9. It has to like I have to put, I thought I had this wedge pillow that my kids played with that was like really shaped like a half circle. And my partner was helping me look. And I picked up the pregnancy pillow that had been down there since I lost that pregnancy. And I held it up, like just to see if I could stick it in it just falls into a perfect number 9 shape. I'm like getting chills, like, but my partner is patient as all hell. And he believes in this kind of stuff because he's been with me long enough to like accept that this can happen to me, but he's a scientist, this guy. And I held up this pillow and we just like looked at each other and we're like, what? And it just became so like, and we remembered how like we felt about that pillow at the time, like how it was like this fun thing to have until like I wasn't pregnant anymore. And then it was like this big thing on our bed and we just like were both like, that is actually crazy. We'd never noticed actually that it looked like a number 9 before. It falls into a perfect like font of number 9. And Yeah. So I don't know. That was like one of the times, but it kind of kept happening of things that like made sense and fit together that like I couldn't have anticipated. I wasn't like trying to hammer anything into like a square peg or whatever. I was just like, things kept coming and I was so excited.
Oh, well, as I say, the show was extraordinarily well received. You took home Best Newcomer for the Jones Bootmakers-ish Edinburgh Comedy Award. Proudly represented.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I remember they said that at the thing. How many shows did you see? 119 or something crazy.
Up until the awards ceremony, I saw 167. But then I saw about 20 more after that over the weekend.
That's crazy.
It was awesome.
It was awesome? You loved that?
I love that. I live for it, yeah.
So funny in these things. I feel like I should have asked you more things, but I know that's not really the point.
No one wants to hear about me. I'm not interesting.
I do. Wow. How long have you been doing that? Seeing that many shows?
I went to my first live comedy show in 1979.
Wow.
When I was 7 years old. I wasn't on my own. I didn't wander in. But it was like... And then I had my teen years, I mostly went to music, but I would go to shows every day as often as I could. And then the music shows went down and down, the comedy shows went up and up. And so in 1979, I saw 2 shows. And then last year I saw 450 comedy shows.
450?
Yeah, so 184 in total at Edinburgh Fringe and about 80 at Leicester, and then one every other day the rest of the year on average.
Have you ever, or do you do stand-up? Do you do comedy?
I was in a band many years ago.
Oh, cool.
So we played very serious songs. We had a lot of props and toys and things on the stage to illustrate the song that we were playing.
Oh my God.
And we would fall over and the songs wouldn't start properly. And it was just slapstick, basically. But I did that until we played, my last gig was in Berlin in 2004, I think. And I haven't picked up a guitar or a prop since.
A guitar or a prop. Anything can be a prop, Mark. If you picked up anything.
I mean, technically the guitar was a prop because I'm not very good at it. So.
Oh my God.
But you never say never. I might do. I'm working on my debut stand-up show.
Are you?
Yeah. Target date 2062. So it'll be, never say never.
That's really cool though. That's so cool. And you just like love it and you review it? No, you do this podcast.
Sometimes I write reviews that I put on my website, but not very often because I run out of ways to say this was brilliant. So
that's good. That's all we want you to say though.
I just copy and paste it onto all your. So yeah, I don't really, but I have my podcast, obviously.
Yeah.
And then my website, there's a couple of articles and things on there, but mostly it's an archive of every show I've ever been to, including the 1979 ones.
Oh my God. I do think it's really interesting to like, because I think also probably because like I really came at it from like, I'm starting to perform now, I'm going to start watching. Mm. I love like thinking and hearing about people who have like always loved it. Yeah. Also, of course, because you interview everybody, there's so many comedians who have like grew up loving it and like knowing that that's what they want to do. And every time I meet someone like that, I'm like, I want to hear like what that's like. It's so different.
Yeah. But this is one of the things that fascinates me because some people are saying, I've always loved comedy since the only thing I can remember. And other people say, well, I don't watch comedy. I'm not really interested in it. But then one day I just did it, or I was tricked into doing it. I never wanted to do it. And some people are.
Yeah.
And so it's so interesting the angles and directions that people come from.
Yeah.
So winning Best Newcomer at the Jones Bootmakers Edinburgh Comedy Awards, how does it feel to get like recognition in that sort of thing, an accolade such as that, and of course all the many other nominations? How does that affect what you do going forward?
Well, I mean, that was a really good award to get because it also came with 12 pairs of shoes that I just got when I was in London. Like it was 5,000 pounds and 12 pairs of shoes. So that really was a huge one. I just got them when I was in London, so I'm like really excited. And I have blisters on my feet because they're new, like I'm wearing them in. So that was a real reason it impacted me. Honestly, okay, the reception of my show is like it's a relief. I think that if I look at the reception versus the fact that I just finished something not knowing how I was going to finish it, and then I finished something like I'm proud of and that I love, I think really what's like kind of moving me into the next thing, if I had to pick, is probably like more the fact that I finished something. Like I finished this project that's all about beginning things, and I'm still doing it. I mean, it's not finished. It still has actually more lives to live. I'm pretty happy about that. But like, that is making me move into the next creative projects that I do, like with the belief that I can complete something, which feels like a huge deal for me because I've known I'm creative. I know I can make things. I know people like me and my stuff usually, but to get to the end of a big project feels like a huge thing. And then to have it like received the way it was received, like to win the Ish Award. I won like some other like magazine awards and the Best European Comedy like award. And I was like, yes, I think that the awards and the critics, like it makes me feel like, I don't know, like confident. Like I feel like I'm moving into the next things, like, oh, like I made this thing that is like as weird and as true to myself and as specific as I could make it, like, and people liked that, which is like, I think the other thing I thought about when I was thinking about making this show was like, oh, I had done just like kind of regular stand-up, and is that kind of, and it had gone really well, and like, is that what people want from me, and is that what people are expecting? And my agent was like really supportive of this show in the end, but I was like worried, like I told them when I decided to, like, I'm going to take a big swing on this. I want you to actually not tell me what you think about that for a while. I was like, I can't handle your opinion until I'm more sure about what I want to make. And so I asked for that, and they gave it to me, and which was like just silence. I was like, you can only. I sent them my first work in progress, and I said, you can only tell me what you like about this, and because they wanted to see it, and I was hesitant to show them anything at that stage, to show anybody anything, but I sent it, and I was like, I need you to hold back any criticism. It's it's in it's infancy. I can't withstand anything about it right now. It'll like push it too far. It'll like the wind could knock me over right now. And so, and they really gave me that. And I really like was able to ask for the support I needed from my director. Lada Rakote was my director, and she really understood that from me. Like, and I picked her because like, she helps me tap into this like silly, open-hearted, mushy, like, but like just really playful place. And so she really understood like to like encourage the playfulness parts and like the like heartfelt parts, and not to like, I don't know, not to blow out the embers. And and so like to have really it's a huge relief to have people have liked it, and to have finished something that is really like me. Like when my friends and my family come to see the show, they're like, that was like you, and that feels amazing. And then that people liked that and like gave it awards is like, that's nuts. That's so cool. That's great.
But not just awards, not just the industry. Obviously, you took the show to Soho Theatre for a run there, and the outpouring of on like Instagram, for example, of other comedians, your peers, giving you standing ovations. What more positive affirmation could you have?
Oh, that's really nice. Yeah, I do think a standing ovation feels crazy. It's crazy when people stand up, because and then when it's happening, like I would rather be anywhere else. Like I would rather be anywhere else than when everyone stands up. And then it feels so good afterwards. Like I can't even believe it happened. But when it's happening, I feel like what I think is like, did I make them do this? Did I stand here too long? Are they like, do they feel forced? Did I like, whatever? But like, yeah, I think that seeing, especially, right, yeah, when you see people you really respect and people you really like stand up clapping for you at the end of the thing you worked really hard on, that does feel good. That feels good.
Yeah. Well, how about your festival experience as a whole then? Because as you say, you did the Pleasance Reserve before. You did a show with Bronwyn Sweeney, Split
Yeah.
Bill. So you've got experience of performing at Edinburgh, the festival. So how is the festival experience for you as a whole?
Well, I did a week split bill with Bronwyn Sweeney in 2022, and that was right after I'd started. That was so great. Bronwyn, actually just listened to a little bit of her episode with you before I came on because she's a good friend, and I was like, I'll see what Bronwyn sounds like talking to Mark. It was nice. And that was like a week. Honestly, when I met Bronwyn and I got signed and I did that that split bill, I hadn't been doing comedy for a year yet, I don't think. Yeah, when I got into the Funny Women finals, I had done comedy like 8 times. It was in 2021, and I had started at the end of 2020 and done it through COVID like a couple times, and then I got it and like did it as much as I could.
Yeah.
So the split bill, I was also like a bit like, what's the point of the Fringe? And like I didn't know what the Fringe was. Like I got signed. I felt like that was very flattering to get signed, and I felt like that's kind of what I felt like I needed when I first started. I have kids. I was like, if I'm going to do comedy, I need instantaneous feedback that I'm good at it and it's going to work. And that is maybe not the best way to approach a hobby that could potentially become a career. Like, I'm going to need to see your credentials to everyone. But I did feel really flattered about that. And then I was like, okay, I'll go and do this split bill, but I'm not sure what it is. I don't know. I don't really understand. And then I did, and I'm really glad I did because I was really overwhelmed. That was like, we were there for 9 days or something. We did 7 shows, I think, or 6 or 7. We did it in a room in Newtown in the basement of what's the name of that venue? Oh, the Stand. It was a Stand. Yeah. Newtown, whatever. And one day there were 7 people in the audience, and one of them was Stuart Lee, and we were just like, and this was like, I was a beginner, actually. Yeah. So I think that was so great for me and hard. And then when I came back the next year as in the Pleasance Reserve, I had a lot more fun watching shows, and I was less like, I was more able to like see what was up and like understand why this was actually an incredible thing. And then by the time I got to do my show there every day, I just can't even believe it exists. Like, I'm just like, this is a thing where people just get to come and do things they made up all year and decide exactly how they want people to spend an hour of time. And then people willingly come and sit there and do it. And then people find out about it just based on what other people are telling them that they liked. And like, it really kind of took that until I was like, oh my God, like it's actually a real gift to the universe that this exists. And it was a slow grow for me. But I like, when I went as the Pleasance Reserve and I got this like pass that got me into all the Pleasance shows, I really started to like get it. And then having the privilege of being able to do your own hour of whatever you want while people come and watch it, and then getting to go and see other people's shows around that was just like, yeah, I am really excited to have found like a cosmos where that exists.
Well, what about that watching then, that opportunity to see all these other acts and in some cases competitors to your own show? Do you watch comedy the same way? Are you analytical, or can you be entertained by it?
I can be for sure entertained by it, but also it's not like I'm not analyzing necessarily. I'm having ideas, like good stuff, and also sometimes like stuff I don't really like gives me ideas. So it's, yeah. So I think watching that stuff felt like, yeah, it felt like an education and an entertainment. Like it feels, when I saw Josh Glantz, sometimes I've seen Josh Glantz now. He's a lot. He's my friend. But when I saw him for the first time was a time that I felt like that clown feeling of like, what? Like, huh? Like, oh, like, is Josh Glantz a comedian or is he a camp counselor? Because I know how to be a camp counselor, actually. And that's kind of what Josh Glantz is doing. Like, that's fun. And then I just got to see how this could include different parts of my life and different like parts of myself. And I got to see that because generous people were already really doing that well. And I think, yeah, the more that I got to be myself, the less I felt like I was competing with anybody. Because like, who else is doing a vacuum cleaner based in like show about miscarriage? Like there's no competition. And like I can't do anybody else's shows either. And I just get to go and love them and be inspired by them. And fucking how nice. How nice. Also, I realized that I had never seen a live show. I had never seen live comedy, a live hour show until I was opening for one. I realized when I went to the Fringe, that Pleasance time, I opened for Sophie Hagen when she came to Denmark. Now we have a podcast together. We're good friends. Help Holt, we have a great podcast together that I should remember to say when I'm on other podcasts. But I realized that that was the first whole hour I saw it was like from behind the curtain. And I was like, I've never seen someone do this for this long. And of course, Sophie was incredible. She's incredible. And she was also a really early encourager of me. I met her because she was coming to Denmark and I like literally like cold DM'd her to be like, can I open for you when you're here? And she like wrote back, watched my tape, was like, you're really good. You live in Denmark? I don't know who you are. Like, what is this? Let's be friends. And then she was just friends with me and we drove around Denmark for her shows here. And we've just really, she was just encouraging exactly in the way that I wanted someone to be early in my comedy trajectory. Yeah. She said all the things you want someone really good to say to you, like, wow, kid, you really got it. Like, wow. That's all I wanted. I wanted somebody to be like, wow, you really got some moxie. You're going to go places.
You've mentioned a few times there about when you're on stage and you are able to represent yourself. But I mean, how much of yourself are we seeing when you're on stage? Because I mean, how much of yourself is the number 9 or a vacuum cleaner? I mean, how much are we seeing you, a representation of you, a version of you, an exaggeration of you?
I think in my show, you really are seeing a lot of parts of me, like different parts at different times. Like I get to be really, really silly in my show. And I feel like that is like really how I am. And I get to like be really, really serious in my show and really tell you something that happened to me that like changed everything. And I get to be like vulnerable and tell you what I think is embarrassing about me. And I get to like, yeah, and I get to go right back to being silly then. And I think that really the reception, when you asked about the reception, like the truth is that what feels so good about that is like, it does feel like people, the critics and the awards are like responding to like, because it's such a personal show. And this is where you have to be careful because like, what if they didn't like it? That would feel bad. But the fact that they really like it and people are responding to it and, you know, crying at the right parts and laughing at the right parts, it feels like a response to me. And I do feel like a bit like, I'm so grateful for that as a place to start my career, like to start and go forward from. But I also feel like, okay, but you can't conflate yourself and the work and the whatever too much because then when it doesn't feel good, it'll feel really bad. But yeah, I think it really is like me. I mean, of course, it's not every part of me. I don't like show you like me like yelling at my kid when I'm tired. But like it's mostly good parts of me, although I don't know if that's really true, but but yeah, I think it's real. That's another big theme of my show, is that I really am trying to tell the truth with it. And that's also something that early in comedy that really stuck out to me, is like, okay, but you write these jokes and then they don't feel true anymore after a while. I did like my funny women set, and a lot of like my early jokes were like about being non-binary, and then I was like, oh, but I don't want to talk about that all the time. And I don't even really feel like that's a big part of my like life and identity. That's kind of just for like other people because they're asking. And I have these funny, interesting things to say about it. So I put together that set, and it did really well, and I got signed, and I was like, oh no, does that mean that's what I talk about now? Because like, that's actually not what I want. And so, yeah, in that way too, this was a relief, because I talk about that a little bit, but I also talk about exactly that, which is that I don't really, those are some of the first jokes I wrote. And I want to be telling the truth on the stage. And I don't know. Yeah, I get to really find a way to say what I think. I think every time I had a moment in building that show, and I'd like to go back to that when I'm like putting it back together for future runs, and I got to for the Soho run a little bit too. Like, I'd like to go back to this feeling, because when I was doing my work in progress, is whenever I had a feeling where I felt like, oh, I wish I could just tell them this. I wish I could just make them understand this thing. I just kind of kept pushing myself and like daring myself to like, what if I just said that exact thing in as plain language as I could, or I said it by doing something else. Like there's a part in my show called Old Man Learns Parkour, which is like just I'm in a wig and I'm trying to learn parkour / jump over a stool. And that started from it being like how I write my journal in the morning, is like I just try to get started, and sometimes it doesn't go anywhere, and sometimes it's just, and as I repeat the words in writing, okay, and that's all I say in that scene. And for me, like making that scene, it was kind of about like trying something that you're probably never going to be able to do. Because the old man is probably never going to be really good at parkour. It's really fun for me to try and climb over the audience. But like, but that kind of came from like this thinking about trying and like how I wanted to approach that. And yeah, that wasn't the plainest language I could have come up with for that, but it did feel like a way of telling the truth though too.
Right back at the beginning, you've mentioned about being in the US and being in Denmark and of course in the UK. So how do you see comedy culturally, the differences in places where you've been?
Well, I haven't performed that much in the US actually. I'm hoping to. I think actually I'm going to get to do my show in New York and LA, which is very exciting. But I have only done like sets and like some spots in America. But of course, my sense of humor is forged in the coals of American minds, in American grade schools, and and in Denmark and the UK, I will say that like for me, going to the UK and getting to perform is a big relief. Danes are very funny. In general, I think like they're funny and I like their humor. To performing here though, especially because I do stuff that is like more alternative. For instance, when I do an impression of a vacuum cleaner, in front of a UK audience, I say I'm doing an impression of a vacuum cleaner. I start doing an impression of a vacuum cleaner and they start laughing right away. When I do an impression of a vacuum cleaner in Denmark, it does take about like 1 full minute before everyone in the room is convinced that both this is really happening and it's going to end eventually. So it's okay to laugh now. So it's like, and that's because I think the people in the audience are like some of them, English is their second, third, fourth language. Some of them are like the people coming to international comedy shows in general are just like really, it is actually like a group of diverse experience. So like there are like refugees, there are pharmaceutical bros, there are like a lot of university students. It is not generally a like consistently, it's not a homogeneous audience at all. And I think that's been really good for me to learn here. That's who I started going up in front of, and I am able to be very broad and likable, and that has made me more able to be very broad and likable. Even broader, even more likable. That's the name of my sequel.
Yeah.
And and also my gender. And they and in the UK when I go, it's like even though we speak the same language, and I can be like coyer or something. I can be like less. I can be. Nobody's going around actually one of my first review from the Funny Women thing, Steve Bennett said I had understated charm. And I was like, I could not be stating this charm louder. Like I could not be stating it more clearly. I couldn't believe he said understated. I don't think I'm understated at all. But in the UK, I do feel like I can play with that more. Whereas here, I feel like I'm throwing the elbows, I'm winking, I'm doing this like shoulder move to make sure people know that I'm telling jokes, even when I'm literally on stage at a comedy show.
When you were describing the doing the vacuum cleaner bit, I honestly thought you were going to say, "Oh, the audience will look at me and go, yes, this is accurate. Yes, I recognize this."
Well, that is really Danish, actually. You've been here. Yes, very good. Yes,
I understand.
Yes, and sometimes the curtains get caught in the machine, in the nozzle.
This has happened to me also.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, then, so far, what do you think have been the best and worst experiences that you've had in comedy? A certain experience that sticks in your mind?
So an instance. Yeah.
Sure.
Like
a moment.
Yeah. Well, one time I did my show in Edinburgh. There's a part of my show where there's a recording where I pretend I'm reading people's minds, and someone mentions Hannah Gadsby in the recording. And once in Edinburgh, Hannah Gadsby was in my show. And I got to, and it was a really fun show. I you know, as I said before, I don't like anyone I know being in front of me. Luckily, I don't know Hannah Gadsby. And there is something, I had the same feeling when Stuart Lee was watching me. There is something where I feel kind of like dared to do well when someone I really admire is in the audience. And Hannah Gadsby was there under a light. I could see their reaction to everything. And then I stand at the door when people are walking in. So I knew that they were there, and then they sat under a light. And I like just say hi to everybody. And one of the people I just said hi to a stranger and like, oh, I like your shirt. And then the next person is Hannah Gadsby. And I was like, whoa. And I was just like, so cool. I was like, hello, like, thank you for coming. I said something like that. But I knew then, I was like, that part is coming. I wonder how that's going to go in the room with Hannah Gadsby. And when that part came, the line that like I could read the audience's mind thinking, it plays over the speakers, is oh, okay, so this is like a Hannah Gadsby thing. And I said something like, no, but what a flattering and strange thing to think on tonight of all nights. And of course, it's 52 seats in the room that I was in Edinburgh, and everyone in that room felt very aware that Hannah Gadsby was in there under a light. And the whole room went crazy for like a minute and a half. Like literally just like everyone was screaming for a minute and a half. Hannah Gadsby like puts their hand. What a good sport, by the way. Now I get to say that I'm friends with them, and they're amazing. But at that time, had never met before. And they like put their hands in the air and kind of like shake their arms in the air. And everyone is losing their shit, like losing their minds. I had to we had to reset the audio cue so I could do it all over again because it was such an intense thing. And then I just walked out of there, and then I met Hannah and their wife Jenny for a drink and got to hang out with them and hung out with them a few times since, and that's been also very cool. But the coolest feeling was like to have someone you had you just mentioned in your show as like in a pre-recorded thing, because they're like an actual comedy idol of you, get to be in the room for that. And then for the whole audience to like do that with you. That was very cool. That was really cool. That felt really fun.
To be clear, that was the best moment, yeah.
Yeah, that was the worst one. That was terrible. I hated that.
On the other hand, so I mean, is there a flip side? What has been the other side of the coin?
When I was in the Pleasance Reserve, I had like I was calling it at the time my Gary Goldman moment on stage. Gary Goldman is a comedian that I really admire. I love him. He's so funny. And sharp. And he has a great special on HBO called The Depresh. And in that, he talks about his depression and his struggle with depression and performing. And in it, also, he addresses the fact that, like, I guess it was like widely known at the time. I didn't know until he told me about it, that he was really depressed trying to go up on stage and like basically just like sat on a stool and was like, I can't, this is awful. Like I couldn't, like he was just like at rock bottom on a stool. That didn't exactly happen to me, but I was doing this show and I happened to know that a lot of industry were in to watch it. It was like, I told people not to tell me, but I knew that like the whole BBC was in that fucking room. And it was the Comedy Reserve, and I was with my friends Kyra and Will and Jin Hao Lee, and they're all very funny. And we had a great time together performing every night. But this night I was on last and Kyra was hosting, and there was this drunk guy in the audience, and he was maybe not just drunk, maybe on drugs. He was really like disrupting the show. Like, and Kyra tried really deftly to handle it and like kept the audience like, but this guy like kept interrupting everyone. It was really, really bad. And like, I really thought backstage, I was like, I'm gonna be able to handle this guy. Like, this is actually where I'm gonna shine. Like, I was a elementary school teacher. Like, this is like whatever. But it like he was just like he ended up like giving like he was like covering his mouth and giving me the finger for the whole time. He was like, couldn't stop talking. It was just like, and I said like things that I thought were funny, but they just like everyone was so sick of this guy by that point that it was just like really done. And I said something like, I wasn't even kidding, but I thought it was really funny. And I was like, I'm going to journal about you tomorrow. But it just wasn't going well. And then, and like eventually, finally, the security came. The security probably should have come another time. But like we had all been like, we can figure this out. But it just had gotten worse and worse and worse with this guy, and his partner like was just enamored with him the whole time. He was being like, the whole audience was like, we hate this guy. And his partner was like, oh my God, he's so funny and wonderful. Anyway, the security guard comes to the side of the stage and waits there. And then the security guard, like, I was like, do you want to? And then she heckles me because she had let me into a bathroom the night before. And she was like, hey, how was your pee last night? And I was like, what is going on? Like, what is going on? And it just felt like the world was like cracking apart. Like, I was like, it was almost like I felt very aware of the industry people there. And I was just like, I really felt like, thank God it's so bad. Like, this is so bad. Like, I'm being like that I can't even, it can't even hurt me. Like, this is like past the point of like, I had a bad gig. I was like, when the security guard is talking to you, instead of taking out the guy who's like yelling obscenities and like it was like, really, I just was like, if it felt like that every night, I might actually keep doing it as like an existential experience. It was an existential experience. But it doesn't feel like that usually. But I was like, wow, this is what it feels like when it goes off the tracks.
Abby, how can we find out about you and where we can come and see you performing?
You can, I think actually I'm going to try to get people to sign up for my newsletter, which you can do on my website, abbywambaugh.com.
Mm-hmm.
You can also follow me on Instagram. I am still on there and I post about things that are coming up, and that's Abby Wambaugh at Instagram.com. That's not how that works. It's at Abby Wambaugh on Instagram. Those are like the main places. But yeah, I think I'm going to start actually using my newsletter so that when, the tech overlords decide we're not allowed to. Yeah, I guess newsletters are going to be the way forward, huh?
Sure, why not? Yeah, probably. I don't know.
Sure, why not? Oh, I also have a podcast. That's a great place to find out about everything in my life, every single detail. And that's Help Hole. And it's with Sophie Hagen, my friend that I talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. Very funny, terrific comedian and writer. And we take turns reading self-help books and then telling each other what we got out of them and what we didn't get out of them. And it's really fun and really good. And right now, our bonus subscribers we're doing the Artist's Way together. And listen, we're going to come out even more creative. It's happening.
And so then my final question, Abby, how would you sum up comedy in a nutshell?
I think comedy is like a promise about where you're going to land. I think I said this in this podcast, but I have been thinking about it lately. It's like comedy is a promise to the audience that like you also want it to be fun. And I think it is like because other mediums at this time don't exist, like public speaking isn't a real thing that people are like doing in the town square. Like comedy is the place where you can really like share your ideas without starting an app or running a country. And I think that's like it gets to be anything else, anything in the whole world, and it's just like this promise that you're gonna also make them laugh along the way. And I really like that.
Thank you so much. It's been a genuine pleasure talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate it. I had a fun time.